use those just like we are using them right now. And he also helped inspire what became the city grid system, which is the way that the streets are laid out here in Chicago. That was completed in the decades that followed. The World's Fairs were also where we get some fun inventions, some things that get their commercial debut. Back in 1893, we got Cracker Jack for the very first time right here in Chicago. Juicy Fruit Gum got its commercial debut back in 1893. World's first moving sidewalk was put up for the World's Fair. The world's first Ferris wheel was erected. It was meant to compete with the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And a woman whose name was Bertha Palmer wanted to sell her chocolate cake to fairgoers, but she wanted ladies to be able to walk around with it and not get chocolate all over their dresses. So she played with the recipe a little bit and invented the world's first chocolate brownie. You can get one of those original recipe brownies over at the Palmer House Hotel, which is located down in the Loop. They still sell the original recipe brownie. They used less sugar back in the 1800s than we use today. You've been warned. Before we move on from the history, I have to take 2 quick seconds and defend my fellow countrywoman, Catherine O'Leary, and her cow, Daisy. If you have heard anything about the Great Chicago Fire, you may have heard that Mrs. O'Leary was milking her cow that night, and the cow kicked over the lantern, and that is how the fire started. We do not know exactly how the Great Chicago Fire started, but we know for a fact that is the one way that it did not. There's a newspaper man working here in the 1870s, worked for a tabloid. He found out that the fire started in the barn of an Irish immigrant with an incredibly Irish-sounding last name. And so at a time of anti-Irish and anti-immigrant sentiment here in the United States, he pinned the blame right on her to sell a couple extra papers. He came out years later and retracted the story. He said, made that up, don't know how the fire started, but it was not like that. But it was too late. The urban legend was born, and Mrs. O'Leary had to leave Chicago. Not all is lost, however. Back in the 1990s, the Chicago Board of Aldermen, which is our city council, passed a resolution that formally pardoned Mrs. O'Leary and her cow, Daisy. There's nothing else going on in the 90s that we had to pay attention to. Bovine pardons #1, everything else after that. Alrighty, back to the buildings. Over on the right-hand side, you got another corncob tower. This one is from the 1980s. It is called River City, and it is a sibling of the corncob towers downtown. It was done by the same architect, Bertrand Goldberg, and it is another city within a city. Up at the top, that's where your apartment complexes are, the section that looks like a corncob. Down at the bottom with those tall glass windows, those are your retail spaces. And then at the river, you have the marina. This marina, along with the marina underneath the corncob towers downtown, during our winter months here in Chicago, have to have air pumping 24 hours a day under the water's surface. We are very lucky here in town. We get weather extremes in both directions. This past winter, it got down to about -30 degrees Fahrenheit with a wind chill, which was just charming. And so they have to keep the river surface agitated during the winter, otherwise the boats would freeze in the water. The rest of the Chicago River regularly freezes throughout January and February. Right up in front of us, you'll see a tall pink building with that crown up on top that's currently illuminated in the center. Sort of looks like a big tub of vanilla ice cream up there in the middle of the building. That is 311 South Wacker Drive. 311 South Wacker gets its pink hue from the pink Texas granite that makes up the sides of the building. And as you can see, that crown is filled with thousands of LED lights. If you're hanging around the Loop tomorrow and you're looking for this building, look for the building with the blue crown when the lights aren't on. The glass up there has kind of a blue tint to it, so look for the building with the blue crown. Now they do this light show throughout the year, but they do have to dim the lights a couple times a year. That's because when they started doing this display, migratory birds would get confused and think that 311 South Wacker was the moon. And it made their migrations significantly shorter. So to help our avian neighbors get to where they're going, 311 South Wacker, along with other buildings nearby, dim the lights throughout the spring and fall. Over on the right-hand side of the river, you'll see another Art Deco building. It has those vertical racing stripes made by the inside windows into the facade. Leading your eyes up to that statue on the top of the building that looks a bit like the Oscar Award. That is the Chicago Board of Trade building. The statue up top was done by John Storrs, and it is of the Roman goddess Ceres, who was the goddess of the harvest. And the first thing they traded on those trading floors were grain futures. May feel far away here in the big city, but Chicago is only about an hour, maybe 90 minutes tops, from farmland that goes on until you hit the Rocky Mountains. So this building is an important reminder of our agricultural industry here in Illinois and across the Midwest. When the building was completed, it was the tallest building in Chicago, a record it would hold for about 30 years. If you have seen Batman Begins, also directed by Christopher Nolan, the exterior of the Board of Trade was used as the exterior of Wayne Enterprises in that movie. So that is the office tower where Batman worked. And now, time to talk about Big Mouth. Right in front of us, you will see a giant black box building with those two white antennae up at the very top. Standing at a height of 1,451 feet at the roof, 1,729 feet at the top of its antenna. It is the Sears Willis Tower. Sears Tower was completed in 1974, and upon its completion became not only the tallest building in Chicago, which it still is today, it became the tallest building on Earth, a record it would hold for nearly 25 years. It was designed by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, Chief Architect Bruce Graham, Chief Structural Engineer Dr. Fosler Kahn. Now, Dr. Kahn came up with a new style of architecture with this building. We call it bundled twos. As you look up the side of the building, you will notice that it cuts out at a couple different locations on its way up to the 110th floor. The Sears Tower is essentially 9 separate towers that have all been smushed together in a 3x3 grid, and each of those 9 sections are one of the bundled twos. By building it in that style, you can get up to those incredibly impressive heights, and it also helps to reduce the sway that the building experiences. In this case, those cutouts, those setbacks, kind of confuse the wind. It makes the wind wrap around the tower at different points. It makes the sway a little less forceful. On a normal night, on a night like tonight, where it's just a little breezy here in town, the Sears Tower is probably swaying 3 to 6 inches of whichever direction the wind is blowing. But we get some incredibly strong winds here in Chicago. So the Sears Tower is designed to withstand wind speeds of up to 200 miles an hour, and it can sway 1.5 feet in each direction. That is about half a meter for those of us playing with the metric system. Now get your cameras ready. In just a second here, you're going to get my favorite view of the Sears Tower. As we pass by this building with the map on the side, and just before we go underneath this bridge up in front of us, you're going to get an awesome shot of the building looking straight up at it. You'll be able to get a photo with the antenna included, which is kind of hard to do from the street while you're this close to the building. You got to be down here on the river. Again, snap that photo before we go underneath this bridge up in front of us. On the other side of the bridge, the building will be partially obstructed, so you're going to want that photo on this side of Jackson Boulevard. Now, some people look at the Sears Tower and they see what I see, which is a beautiful example of black box modernist architecture and a stunning feature of the Chicago skyline. Some people look at the Sears Tower and they see a jungle gym. The building has been scaled twice throughout its history. It was climbed for the first time back in the 1980s by a man whose name was Dan Goodwin. Dan Goodwin went by the nickname Spider Dan. And Spider Dan put on his special Spider-Man costume, complete with suction cups on the hands and feet, and he made it all the way up to the roof, where he was very promptly arrested. It is illegal to climb skyscrapers. Don't do it. Then in the 1990s, it was scaled a second time, this time by a French dude whose name was Alain Robert. He went by the nickname French Spider-Man, or Spider-Man! I thought that was no joke. And he climbed the building using just his bare hands. He has climbed several tall buildings around the world, including the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, which is currently the tallest building on Earth. He says he climbs those tall buildings to get over his fear of heights, showing just how far some men will go instead of going to therapy. If you look on the side of the building, you'll see 5 glass boxes that are sticking out of the facade. Has anyone been up to the sky deck yet? Has anyone been out on those boxes? Did you guys step out on the box? Y'all are braver than I am. Up there on the 103rd floor is the Sears Tower's observation deck. It is called the Sky Deck. If you have not gone yet, it is totally worth checking out. I personally am a giant baby when it comes to heights. I've been up there many times. I think it's very, very cool. You have unparalleled views of the city, and on a clear day, you can see into Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan. You also have the opportunity to step out onto one of those glass boxes. They call them the ledge, and you can look down to thousands of feet to the street below you. Last thing I'll say about the building is about its name. When I introduced it, I called it the Sears Willis Tower. Back in 1974, when the building opened, it was known as the Sears Tower. It was the headquarters for Sears. They gave the building its name. Sears left the building and Chicago altogether back in the 1990s. And in 2009, the naming rights to the building came up for grabs. So the Willis Insurance Brokerage, who were leasing 3 floors of office space up inside the building, got the opportunity to lease the naming rights to the building for an extra $1 million a year. And for that low, low price of an extra $1 million a year, exactly 0 Chicagoans have ever called that building the Willis Tower. We are stubborn here in Chicago. That is a Sears Tower as far as we're concerned. Joke in town is that it's spelled W-I-L-L-I-S, pronounced Sears. Gonna make our way back into Art Deco Alley. I'll show you the building that's gonna be on the left-hand side now. This is 2 North Riverside Plaza, which is the former home of the Daily News of Chicago, back when that newspaper existed. This is the Daily News building. This building went up in a period of Egyptomania here in the United States, following the discovery of King Tut's tomb back in the early 1920s. So this building was designed to make you think of the Sphinx at Giza. It's got that river-facing public plaza down at the bottom that is flanked on either side by those structures. Those are meant to make you think of the paws of the Sphinx. And then the front of the building is where the man's face would be. You got some other Egyptian motifs on this building, including the obelisks on the riverside that are holding up the street lamps, and the bas-relief sculpture in the facade of the building, which are homage to hieroglyphics. We talked about sway in a couple of different buildings. I'll point out how one final building handles sway. It's one we've already chatted about. It's on your left-hand side now. It's got that Y-shaped base. It looks like a mechanical pencil or a knife's edge down here at the bottom. This is 150 North Riverside again. As I was saying earlier, this building is only taking up about 20% of the lot that it's standing on down here at its base, which means that you don't have a lot of room at the street level to play with to account for sway. They use a different type of sway neutralization up inside this building. I love talking about it because it is physics I understand, which does not happen often. On the inside of the building, you cannot see them from where we are, but up at the very top are 12 giant concrete tanks that they can fill with water, just regular liquid water. You know that when you hold a bucket with water in your hand and you swing that bucket in front of you, while the water sloshes back the opposite way. And when you swing that bucket back behind you, all the water moves in the opposite direction. Same principle in effect here. It's called inertial slosh dampening. Wind will hit the side of the building and push the structure, whichever way the wind is blowing, and then the water inside those tanks will slosh in an equal and opposite way, keeping the building largely still. Also have to point out up here at the street level is a restaurant called the Small Cheval. Small Cheval is an offshoot of another popular Chicago joint called Au Cheval. Same teams, just different locations. Often voted best burger in Chicago. So if you're looking for a good burger while you're here in town, the Small Cheval right here in the West Loop. Brief time out from the tour. This is going to be your last call at the bar. Last call. Go visit Kathy now, or you are just going to have to come back tomorrow. Going to make our way back into Wolf Point. Show you the building that's going to be on the right-hand side of the river. This building that has the curve to it, this is the Nuveen building. The Nuveen building is another 1980s contextual style building. That curve matches the curve that we're following down here on Wolf Point. On every other floor, you'll notice that it's a little bit easier to look inside the building. On those floors, the windows are tinted green to match the river water down below. And then on the darker floors, those windows are tinted blue to match the sky above. If you're from Chicago, you would recognize this building from hanging out down here by the river. If you are not from Chicago, you may recognize this building from a little documentary called Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This is the office building where Ferris Bueller's dad worked. It's where he watched the parade from. And it was used as that filming location only months after construction was completed. Down on the right-hand side of the river is the Chicago Riverwalk, which is this pathway that is following the river's edge. The Riverwalk was part of Daniel Burnham's plan for Chicago. He thought Chicagoans should and would want to have access to their river. It would take us over 100 years to make the Riverwalk a reality. This section was completed in 2016, and it runs from here in Wolf Point all the way down to Lake Michigan. Even before the Riverwalk was completed, Chicagoans spend plenty of time down by the river. We use it as one of our major gathering grounds here in the city. We come down to the river throughout the year for things like parades and protests. And once a year, in the middle of March, we all come down and watch the local plumbers union dye the Chicago River green for St. Patrick's Day. I do not know why we do that here in Chicago. They don't do it anywhere in Ireland. But it is a proud, uniquely Chicago tradition that is not going anywhere anytime soon, and I happen to think it is quite a lot of fun. Over on the left-hand side, you've got this giant, gray Indiana limestone building with those vertical racing stripes made by the inset windows into the facade. This is the Art Deco masterpiece of the Merchandise Mart. Merchandise Mart was constructed in 1929 for the Marshall Field department store, and upon its completion, it became the largest building on Earth. A record would hold until the completion of the Pentagon just outside of Washington, D.C. This building stands at 25 stories tall and over 4 million square feet of area inside, over 7 miles of hallways, 43 elevators, as its own stop in Chicago L, and until 2008, it had its own zip code. That is how monumental and huge Art Deco buildings were back in the 1920s and 30s. If you've not yet had an opportunity to walk along the Chicago Riverwalk, I highly recommend it. By the time we get back to the dock, it'll be a little late for it tonight, but we're supposed to have beautiful weather for the rest of the weekend. So if you have time tomorrow, get out there and enjoy the Riverwalk. It's one of my personal favorite spots here downtown. Lots of little places to grab a bite to eat, grab a drink, hang out, watch the river pass you by. And each section of the Riverwalk, between each set of bridges, has a different design and theme to it. So you can take yourself a little architectural tour of the city just by following the river's edge. There's a restaurant that I can recommend to you that's located on the Riverwalk. It's a little bit further up. It's called the Northman Beer and Cider Garden. The Northman has excellent options on tap, and they also make a pretty mean Chicago-style hot dog. The Chicago dog is the most important invention of the 20th century behind penicillin, I guess. It is an all-beef frank served in a steamed poppy seed bun with pickles, peppers, onions, tomato, mustard, celery salt, and never, ever, ever ketchup. If anyone in Chicago tries to sell you a hot dog with ketchup on it, run. They don't want what's best for you. I can recommend, I honestly think the most places in town that do a Chicago dog do it halfway decently. I think it's kind of hard to mess up. The only word I recommend avoiding if you're going to buy a Chicago dog is the word gourmet. You are buying a hot dog. Don't get taken for a ride. Over on the right-hand side of the river is my personal favorite building on this tour. It's this low gray building with the 55 up there at the top. This is 55 Wacker Drive, sometimes lovingly referred to as Danny DeVito standing between two supermodels. 55 Wacker is a brutalist building. Brutalism sounds angrier than it actually is. It's from the French phrase béton brut, which means raw concrete or rough concrete. That's what you're looking at here on the sides of this building. I think of brutalism sort of like black box modernism turned up to 11. What you're really looking at here is the structure of this building. It's just been brought out a little bit closer to the street side with that concrete. Not everyone loves brutalist architecture. I might be on a team of one. That's okay if I am. I think some people don't love brutalism because it was the unofficial style of the federal government for about 20 years. So there's a lot of courthouses, DMV, stuff like that are housed in brutalist buildings. People don't always have that much fun inside of them. Over on the right-hand side of the river, you will see a building that looks a little bit like a cake topper. It's got those gazebo structures about 2/3 of the way up the building. This is the Jewelers Building. As the name would suggest, the Jewelers Building was originally used as gallery and retail spaces for jewelers, people selling watches and rings and all that kind of fun stuff. And the building opened during Chicago's gangland past, when folks like Al Capone and the Chicago Outfit were terrorizing the streets. And so this building had some interesting security back in those days. Back when it opened, the building had a car elevator right in the side of the building. So So if you were coming downtown, you were getting your watch fixed, buying a ring, spending some money, doing whatever you were doing, you could drive your car right into the side of the building, be brought up to whatever floor you were doing your business on, be brought back down to the street side, and go about your afternoon without your shoes ever having to hit the sidewalk. They could only use that car elevator for about the first 10 years that the building was open. Very quickly, American cars got too big. The elevator could no longer lift them. There is a rumor that Al Capone was somehow connected to the restaurant that used to be up at the top of that building. That is just a rumor. At the time that that restaurant opened, Al Capone was in Alcatraz, so he was otherwise occupied. He is also not connected to the restaurant that is up there now because he is famously dead. Over on the right-hand side of the river, you will see a skinny blue building that says London House up at the very top, and then it carries on to the left of that. That is the London House Hotel, which is home to one of the best rooftop bars in the United States. It was most recently ranked number 3 in the country, I believe. I can recommend this bar to you. You got absolutely beautiful views of downtown and of the river. If you go up there to buy yourself a drink, you will spend a couple of dollars, but it's worth it for the views alone. That is, again, the London House, which is located on Michigan Avenue, just south of the river. Chicago is the anchor of the largest media market in the Midwest. We have 2 major newspapers in town nowadays. The second largest by circulation is the Chicago Sun-Times, and the largest newspaper in town is the Chicago Tribune. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Tribune was owned by Robert McCormick, and he wanted the most beautiful office tower on earth to house his newspaper. He put up one